Welcome, Sandy Bott Miller, to Artist Spotlight 2020 with the Millstream Arts Festival, also in collaboration with the Art Crawl downtown St. Cloud. Very excited to have you here, Sandy. And you have been a part of Millstream for a long time, and this would have been your 10th year. Well, this is right now your 10th year
hmm hmm
participating in Millstream. And I would like you to start out by sharing a little bit about your work, who you are, your background.
Okay, thank you, Alicia.
Mhm.
Well, I think this first image that you're going to see
Okay.
is probably the one that people are most familiar with because it's been used in the community in a variety of ways. I first created it for an event called Gather the Women, which happened on the St. Benedict's Monastery. I think it was maybe 11 years ago. And then the women in the music department at St. Cloud State asked if they could use this image for their program and for advertisement for their spring concert, Her Story, Her Song. And that is a wonderful event celebrating girls and women's voices, whether by music or whether with poetry or written things. So,
Mhm.
and I will just show you a little bit of the process. So you can probably see that the figures are glued on there. It's a collage event. But all of my oil pastel works, I use a knitting needle, the point of a knitting needle, and etch into illustration boards. So the four labyrinths in the corner and all of the words were first etched on a black board and then layered with oil pastels. So I think what I'll do is go through some of the themes. 10 years ago, when I first started with this process, after this initial work, I did a large number of what I call the Great Mother, Grandmother Spirit, the Divine Feminine, Mother Earth, and developed probably about 12 different images. Some of them are situated in seasons and some aren't. A little bit later in the next one, you will see that I didn't use the knitting needle to actually draw in the initial image. I went right in with the oil pastels, and this was an attempt after my own mother died to again use a Mother Earth figure, a loving Mother God figure, holding my mother as she died, and then conveying her leaving her body afterwards. And then the next image here, and actually the next two will kind of demonstrate the importance that yarn and books have in a lot of my artworks. I actually get as much thrill going into a bookstore or library as I do a yarn store. And while with each of those items, yarn and books, I developed a whole series of images. Um, in these two artworks, they act more as symbols. And if you go back to the last one that you just showed, it's called Asking a Question of the Dreamer. And oftentimes when people come into my booths and look at my artworks, they'll say, "Will you tell me a little bit about this?" And while I'm often very happy to do that, I find it more interesting if a person's willing to engage and I can ask them, what do you see in the image that you're looking at? And this particular one, I might ask them what objects you see to begin with. And they probably would look at the trees, notice that they're not typical trees. There's faces in them. They might notice the different figures at different ages and stages. And anyway, I might engage with them of what memories do those trigger for you before I go into talking about what the artwork meant to me. And in the second one that you're continue to go on, again, yarn is there, but it's present in the books. And this is the title of it. I can't remember. I think it was Turning the Last Page. And it's about somebody about ready to leave our earth. And it's us left behind in these books, trying to figure out ways to move on and nurture ourselves. And I think a open book kind of symbolizes how we each approach doing that in a variety of different ways, as you can see in the figures here. Working with community in the bottom, might be writing for somebody, it might be sitting out in nature, it might be surrounding yourself with what gives you an opportunity to express yourself. And then continuing with the oil pastel works, once in a while there'll be an event that just causes me to pause and create a reaction. And although a lot of my artworks are manifestations of what's going on in my inner world, sometimes something beckons me from outside myself that just stirs me to create something. And this artwork is titled It's Not Your Fault, and it was meant to address many forms of abuse. There was a particular incident that I was specifically working with, but it was meant to be a universal artwork that hopefully could appeal to a variety of people who it's oftentimes the first impulse to blame yourself. And I had to include one of my Labyrinth works. I have created a series of about 12 or 13 artworks, and the Labyrinth is, I'd say, one of my spiritual practices in which I often walk when I have a question that I want to pursue, whether it's about loss, disappointment, a decision, a celebration, and it's just been a spiritual practice that has had a lot of meaning for me. And then I think this is the last of the oil pastels, which I created for about 7 years before I moved into fibers. This one is called Making Room for Transition. And I think it was T.S. Eliot that said, to make an ending is to make a beginning. This artwork I created when I left my teaching job. It'll be 10 years this spring. And I think it kind of speaks for itself. I left to make room for my art, and the figures in here convey what you have to let go of in order to put something new in. And although it was about my experience, I have a hope that other people that are making big transitions, it can somehow speak to them as well.
You know, the piece that I love about your oil pastel, Sandy, and thank you for sharing the process with them, the etching
Uh-huh.
on the surface of it also, because the textures and the script and all those pieces, it you know, and I know that a lot of people know your work through fiber and too, and you see that in your oil pastel. You see the fiber lines, you see the fiber weavings, you see the patterns that come out in your
Mm-hmm.
fibers. So I love that we're transitioning
Mm-hmm.
from, you know, the oil pastels into the fiber pieces also. And people can purchase your work. Also, they can go to Minnesota Street Market and they can pick up your work
Mm-hmm.
there. I was just in there yesterday and saw it on the wall there in the space they have. You can also, I know, get cards of your pieces there. They can contact you through email.
Mhm.
through sandybotmiller@gmail.com. Your cards are also at the local blend, and you're on Instagram, so people
Yeah.
can
Mhm.
contact you through Instagram and engage and see maybe some new work you're working on or pieces that you have on there that they can contact you through with.
Mhm.
But I definitely, as we're moving through your 10 years of your experience, I know that now we're going to get into the fiber pieces, also what you have behind you, but we'll start by sharing some of those then.
Well, I put up this foursome just to demonstrate. I mean, I work with fibers in a variety of ways, and these are some of my more spontaneous creations where I really don't have a sense of what I'm going to do or where I'm going to go before I'm done. The one, the predominantly gray one in the bottom left-hand corner. I just had an interest in working with grays one winter day and just brought in colors and moved with the colors and turned them however I felt moved. The one on the right bottom, I had a sense of what I wanted to do, but I didn't know how I was going to do it. And it was wanting somehow to create something in which wholeness was holding shatteredness. And so the little pieces, kind of mosaics, are like shattered glass. And then the figure, sort of abstract figure, is trying to hold all of that together. And this is one that I created this past year and it was part of a poetry collaboration that was held at Red Wing virtually because it happened in March and April. And I was given a poem, as were 26 other artists that were chosen to create an artwork as a response to the poem. And I'm going to read the poem by Jennifer Jessup in which this artwork was created. And it's called Marigolds. My deck brims with all their gold. How they peddle their brightness for us. I long for their color all winter. Even their stink fills me with summer. Let me live as they do, for months and months of bold orange. Let me keep their glow, their gold, shiny awe. And when I must die, shroud me in all the marigold yellow, orange, gold petals, like confetti, all over, singing out. I'm always amazed with a poetry art collaboration. How this, I wouldn't have created this without the poet's poem, and how magical that is. This artwork, since it was created during the pandemic, it was more of an afterthought, but it also looks to me now like the juxtaposition of being able to be close together with people and now the distance that we're needing to keep from one another in order to look out for the common good of everybody.
Beautiful, beautiful. Let's look at another piece here.
This was also one that I did the year before at a poetry collaboration at Crossings in Zumbrota. And I'm going to read the short poem. I just loved this poem by Bernardine Lourdes. And this is the poem that I was given to work with. And it's called Magnanimous. The lake owns the moon tonight, cradles its delicate face, fragile as a French crepe, line on its indigo plate, offers free to those in need, nourishment only beauty can sustain. And the thing I love about a poetry art collaboration is that as the artist, I try to stay true to the meaning behind the poem and the poet's intention, but we're also given permission then to expand it to bring in how the poem speaks to us. And thus, I decided to turn the moon into a figure with open, compassionate arms, holding its own reflection. And I think I called this cradling the gift of reflection.
Beautiful, beautiful. This, the one thing I do want you to talk about, if it comes out, which I'm sure it will at some point, is the amount of time it takes you to do one of these pieces, like the ones behind you
Sure.
on the wall.
Okay,
So,
sure. So you, Alicia, mentioned a connection between my oil pastels and my weavings in terms of texture and pattern, and I think you're right that there's a large connection. And in fact, I've been weaving for decades, so it was more my weaving informed my oil pastels. Now my oil pastels are informing my weavings as well. And so these Mother Earth figures are come from a similar energy as the great mother figures that I did with the oil pastels. And this is a winter, spring, summer, and fall collection. And on these, I started doing some embroidering, a little bit with French knots, and then creating little circles in which I, in the autumn in the bottom right, sewed onto my finished weaving. So,
wow. Right, then the next piece.
and these are a series that I finished working on about a year and a half ago. And they relate to the Black Madonna, whom I've been attracted to for a number of years. As I began working with the figure of the Black Madonna, I read a kind of scholarly book about all the ways the paintings, the sculptures that have survived fires, that have survived wars, and some of the origins of why artists worked with the image of Mary in the terms of a Black Madonna. But mostly what moves me was a book by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, in which she wrote a book called Untie the Strong Woman. And in there, she invites each individual to let the Black Madonna speak to me, to each of us in however she appears. And she, along with that, talks about how she appears in so many cultures and so many different religions. But while I was weaving these, that's what I paid attention to with each of the colors that moved me. And lately I've begun writing some of my own poetry. And at the same time, I had read a book called Leaping Revelations and Epiphanies by Brian Doyle. And in that, he talks about his Catholicism and the rituals and the symbols in there. And although I don't currently find a home in the Catholic Church, I am deeply grateful and still influenced by many of the symbols. So I attribute the impulse to want to write some little snippets to him. So at this point, I'm going to hold up each of these weavings and just read what moved me to write about them. So this one I called Sacrum Cor, or Sacred Heart. After wild lion hearts call out names of the dead, we process, to the altar, linger a while in blue twilight. She lights 7 candles, one for each of my decades, lets loose a litany of sounds flowing from tear ducts, hands me a dress dyed with elderberries and kindling to ignite the cold ashes stored inside, then breathes stars into my sleeves to keep lit memories of a blessed mother nursing her babe. I'm just going to go through the next 3 and read the poems without commenting.
Please.
Gratia, grateful. Tonight I'm rooted by roundness, fullness, moved by touch, by grace, a savage love, by yellow gold lightning, sparks stitched deep inside me. Rosea stellas, or pink stars. Wearing a soft-hued cassock, once scorned as too feminine, she hands me a piece of the sky she stitched onto canvas, invites me to inhale her rose-scented stardust, settle into her pinkness. I begin visualizing, blushing my way into dawn, and at dusk, breakdancing across the horizon in a magenta vestment and stole, bestowing bold signs of peace to my loved ones. And then the last of the 7 that I've created. Liber Sanctorum, or Holy Book. She raises it high as though she's proclaiming the word of God to a packed congregation, then presents me with this blank book, thirsty for imagery and shaped like a butterfly. I paint myself growing up near a compost pile, a late bloomer, with tough stems made of scar tissue and love knots, my blossoms riddled with honeybees. And I record her promise that when it's time to deadhead, uproot, she will cradle me like a holy book before she transplants me. So this has been a wonderful process and development of my own. I've taken several online poetry classes and am beginning to write poems to accompany some of my own artworks. And as I was reading that, I recalled your asking me to talk a little bit about the process. So I will do that briefly here. So when I do a weaving, I start with just gold ring that you can actually buy at any craft store, and you can buy them in a variety of sizes. This one behind me is the largest size I work with, which is 27 inches. The one over here is about 18 inches, and then I put 3 little ones up there that are 5 inches. And I've actually even done little ones here that are 3 inches.
Oh, beautiful.
So they come in a variety of ways. The next thing that I do is I wrap the gold metal circle here so that when I warp my threads all around concentrically, they won't slip all over the metal. Okay. And then the warping process, as you can see, the threads are all concentrically warped, which provides or introduces some constraints. The biggest challenge I have is in the center where they're so close together that I have to try to make sure that it doesn't look like a bullseye. And when I weave, I might start here, I might start, on the side. I think, let's see. Well, with these figures, I did try to do the figures first, and then work around it. But sometimes I'll start with the background, like this one. Oh, I did a little bit in the middle and then a little bit on the side, and then went right to the middle of it and just went back and forth, having a good time playing with color and line and shape and texture.
I really love the spiritual part of your work and the connections with women and the literature piece with it also and the poetry. They're so full of so much.
Mhm,
And I love also when you shared earlier about how you like to hear how people react to the pieces
mhm,
also, even
mhm,
before
mhm,
knowing the story behind it, because that's
mhm,
the beauty in art
mhm.
is if people
Right,
sometimes find their own story in the
right,
pieces also.
right.
And I know again, they can contact you through your email at
Mhm,
sandybotmiller@gmail and on Instagram. And then also at the Minnesota Street Market, I've seen your cards and your pieces hanging on the wall here, all sizes I saw
mhm.
at the Minnesota Street Market.
Yes, yes.
And
I
then
actually at Millstream, I had some college students say that they couldn't afford to buy a bigger weaving. And had I ever considered doing something really small? And at that point, I had not. And they just said, we don't have a lot of money, but we could afford a smaller one, or we, have small spaces to hang them. So I do have about 9 of those hanging at the street market right now. Yes.
uh
Um,
wonderful that
yeah.
that you are getting ideas and exploring different ways for people that
Mhm.
share their needs with you too. That's
Right,
wonderful. That is
right.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, Sandy, as we close the day, is there anything you'd like to end our time with?
Um, Maybe just to reiterate a little bit of what you said, that while I create, to be honest, I create art because it gives me meaning. It keeps me
Mhm.
grounded. If I didn't do that, I don't know what I would do. But my deeper hope is that I create pieces that will connect with others for whatever individuals are going through. And
Mhm.
I guess I just say especially thank you to Millstream, to you, Alicia and Mary, especially, and to the Minnesota Central Arts Board for providing the grant for you to come up with a creative alternative, virtual alternative while we weren't able to hold this event this year. So thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for being with us, Sandy. And we need to support our artists during this time, and your art brings hope and some
Mm,
spirituality that people may need right now too. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank
Take
you.
care.
You too. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.